starting your day in the exact same way. Your child comes into your bedroom early in the morning holding that beloved copy of Where's Spot, and you need to read that several times before you can even begin helping her get ready for her school day. Usually that'll be brushing her hair, brushing her teeth, changing her diapers, getting her dressed, and then eventually heading downstairs so you can start making breakfast, which is almost always to the sound of wheels on the bus. Now, if you have children in your household, that may seem like a routine that you're doing as well. And it's the routine that I've been doing for as long as I can remember, and it will probably be one that will be with me for a long, long time. The child that I'm describing to you is my 16-year-old daughter, Ava. Ava's actually taller than me, and even though she's physically a beautiful young girl who is a junior at Palo Alto High School, Ava is developmentally no more than a preschooler. She's completely nonverbal, and she requires help with every aspect of her daily life. And Ava has an older sister, Emma, who just started her second year at Fordham University in New York, which means that my husband and I are parenting two wonderful girls, but two girls that have very different needs. And Ava is now representing a statistic around the world that shows us that she is one in the 4 people around the world that are either living with a visible or an invisible disability. And having a child or someone in your family that is disabled, of course, it affects the whole family. It affects what you do and where you go, and it really changes your whole perspective on life. And interestingly, this large and growing group around the world is indeed a group that any number of us, any one of us, can become a member of at any time simply by walking, skiing, driving, or just by getting older. And interestingly, the Americans with Disabilities Act here in this country has been transformative to allow public spaces created to allow visitors and guests and people that use wheelchairs really access into public spaces. And of course, that time is important, and it's overdue that we had done that. But I found it interesting that only 10% of people that have a disability are wheelchair users, and the other 90% are people like us, people that either have no diagnosis, it might be those that have autism, people that have cognitive differences. In short, it's a large group, and in many cases, that group still continues to be overlooked in the day-to-day design and the day-to-day policy making and all the things that are important to all of us as a way to belong in our communities. And isn't it always important to feel like we belong? As a parent, that sense of wanting your children to belong no matter who they are and being part of a community for who they are is really important. But even more important when you have that child with a disability is you really want people to be kind to them and to include them. And in our earliest of years, my husband and I were certainly doing everything you would expect. We were frenetic and looking for the diagnosis and trying to figure out how to help our child blend into this world and possibly be part of a group that we thought was sort of invisible. We didn't know what kind of services were there for her. And at around the age of 5, Ava was still not walking. She was really what they called a failure to thrive child, which means she wasn't doing a whole lot of anything. And we were really fatigued from those experts telling us, well, we just don't know what's wrong with her. So at around that age, we found an avalanche of experts all of a sudden saying, well, we actually do think there might be something that could help your child quite profoundly. And what's interesting about this advice is it actually would help and be beneficial to every one of us here in the audience. vestibular motion. They said, you need to get Ava in front of as much vestibular motion as possible. Well, what is that? Short and sweet is that it is simply movement and our body, our brain's feedback that we get from moving, right? Left to right, back and forth, side to side. And that indeed is something so important to the development of our brains. It starts in utero when we're swishing around, all the way up to those ages when we're older adults and we're looking for those rocking chairs. The movement is really profound, and it gives us feedback to learn where we are in space and builds our muscle tone. It can help develop language. And so, of course, I live in the heart of Silicon Valley, and when they said your child could benefit from movement at that age of 5 or so, I thought, great, I'm going to just hit one of those playgrounds that I used to go to with my older daughter, Emma. Now, playgrounds in our community were quite welcoming. It was the place that you go and you have a play date and you meet with friends. But then when I went with Ava and Emma, it became a very unwelcoming experience, and it was actually quite a nightmare because that welcoming place was no longer really created with 2 different children in mind. And so when I took Ava, remember she wasn't walking, and that meant that I would carry her, and that the little tan bark chips she would end up putting in her mouth. I was trying to swing her, but she couldn't fit into the bucket seat, and she was not able to hold on to the swing. So as any good parent would, I panicked and I looked on the internet and I found an indoor place to take her swinging. It was about an hour away, expensive, was not covered by insurance, and they could only take us once a week. Well, that's like going on a diet once a week, isn't it? It's not very effective. And it wasn't long that after a few months, I thought to myself, okay, I am paying the big bucks to live in Silicon Valley, innovative capital of the world. What is going on with my own playgrounds? And so I decided to look at my local playgrounds with a different eye. These are playgrounds in my community, and maybe if you have kids or you remember playing on things like this, these are what I came across all over the area that I live. Now, these are indeed compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act law. Again, remember saying that it is supposed to provide access for those members of our communities that want to enjoy the playgrounds. But really what has happened with playgrounds, especially since the 90s, is that while they're compliant, they're not really even accessible for the wheelchair user. And if you see what I'm saying, you see those 2-level structures. If anybody remembers those or sees those in their community, it was intriguing to me. Well, how are these even accessible to a wheelchair user? They didn't seem terribly fun, but what about the wheelchair user that they really designed these new structures for? And what I discovered was really surprising. You'll look at the other picture of the boys who are trying to get out of the wheelchair. That was indeed an intention. Every time you see these structures, there's the handle, and you are expected to sort of transfer yourself out of the wheelchair and sit there and watch people come by and play, or you develop this upper body strength where you can pull yourself up and you somehow make it up there, which was completely sort of just unrealistic in a way. And so these playgrounds didn't seem to work well for those people that I knew in my community who couldn't play with their kids on the playgrounds. So who else was being left out? And I discovered that there was this long list of people in my own community that were truly being overlooked in the design of something as vital as a community playground. That first place, it's like that first outdoor classroom, the first place that we sense that we belong to the community, where we meet people of different interests, abilities. And so as I started to discover this, I found that, in our area, 1 in 45 children now are being diagnosed with autism. They play very differently. Those structures are very frenetic for them. They don't have the opportunities to get away from active play. A lot of children with autism run off of public spaces, places, and so not having a public playground being fenced in, being near a street, that causes a lot of children to run off and become hurt. Then there were lots of people in the communities that were like my Ava, so maybe not as significant, but they were one age developmentally and another physically. So in short, there was a lot of people that we discovered that were not being included in something like a public playground. Well, I am a Silicon Valley native, and I spent all my years in career and in tech, and I like to problem solve. So I went to my city of Palo Alto at the time, and I said, listen, where are the playgrounds? I'm not looking for a special needs playground. I'm not looking for a wheelchair playground. I'm just looking for a playground where I can take both of my kids. To which they said, you know what? You're right. We actually don't have those kinds of playgrounds that you might find right. So you need to build the kind of playground that you think we need in our community. Well, first of all, I was in the thick of trying to adjust to life with two very different children, one of which had some significant needs on my time, and I didn't have the time to build a new playground, but I was up for the challenge, and I said, you know what? If you think I can come to you with an idea for a playground, let me get back to you. Took to the internet, and I was hopeful that I would find a playground that would inspire me, and I would find it, maybe it was in Israel or in Sweden or somewhere around the world, and I would come back and I'd say, I found the kind of playground that our community would benefit from, so could you please, get the blueprints and build the same thing? I didn't find it, and I spent quite a bit of time looking for it. And so ultimately, we did design a playground that now is indeed being considered the nation's most innovative, inclusive playground. And how did we do that? Well, we actually took to, we were not designers, and we ended up just doing it through what we call intentional design. And an intentional design is something every single one of us should be doing, can be doing, and I'm going to tell you all about it. It's so easy. And it is really what creates that inclusive society. And who doesn't want to be included? Everybody, right? So the first thing we did is learned who are the users. Who is going to use this playground? Well, in short, it's going to be the whole community, everybody in the community. So we're designing it for the community, but very importantly, that it's not just a checklist at the end of the process that we've done it, but we need those people to be at the table with us at the very beginning. So we had those people that had not been considered in the design of their local playgrounds, so many of them, join us at the table. So I had the parent who had a 30-year-old with autism that still benefited from movement. I had the father, Carl, who's an engineer who was in an accident, 3 small kids, could never play with them. So in short, we had a lot of people around the table, but who did we have the most? We had parents of children that had no disabilities, but they wanted their children to play with my children, because when you talk about empathy, kindness, all the foundations, all the things that I would like part of my world as I get older to be part of our children's world, and when you take away those physical barriers, the social barriers start to go away too. So in short, everybody joined us. And in the end, you have to evaluate and update your ideas, make sure that you did a good job, because in the end, that is what we want to continue to do, is to provide it. So 2015, I'm forwarding about 7 years of lots of lemonade stands and fundraising and community building and awareness. We opened the Magical Bridge Playground in Palo Alto, and it was the beginning of something that we really never expected in terms of the response. So what makes a Magical Bridge Playground magical? Well, we learned a lot in those 7 years. And the first thing we learned is ages really need to go away from playgrounds. In fact, those playgrounds that we see all around that are clustered to be 2 to 5-year-olds, 5 to 12-year-olds, that doesn't work for a Magical Bridge Playground. Everybody is welcome, every age is welcome, and we know the benefits from much research that's been done about play. It always talks about the youngest of children, right? But when you think about the benefits extending throughout our entire lives, why do we limit the opportunity for that movement? In fact, that vestibular motion that we talked about, it's now being proven to ward off Alzheimer's. And so Magical Bridge is for everyone. We have the different developmental milestones represented in our playground because predictability matters of the layout. The children, the visitors that have autism need to feel that when they come in, they know where everything is. Those specific feedbacks that we benefit from, swinging, spinning, sliding, all of that is available in clusters and zones, and so whatever you are able to do, however large you are, however small you are, strong, any age, any ability accesses those experiences. Because if you look at someone like my own daughter that still to this day can't hold on to a swing, she can experience the swinging in any number of the things that we have. So in Innovation Zone, we love the Silicon Valley and our heritage to innovation, and so each of, the Magical Bridge in Palo Alto, we wanted to marry those wonderful things, and so we had an artist from the Burning Man family of artists do something spectacular for us that really was experiential and musical. We have a kindness corner, again, the foundation of what we did is kindness, a community playhouse, and a stage. And so what might you see if you come and see the Magical Bridge Playground in Palo Alto, which I would love to invite all of you to? Well, you might see Ava wandering around with my husband, Robert. There's Ava. There's the laser harp that we have. Families are driving for hours, and at the moment, Magical Bridge, which is less than an acre large, sees 25,000 visitors a month. Making it one of the most busy playgrounds in the nation. You might see our 18-year-old friend Leo, who has autism, but he comes to swing regularly because he can, and it's not weird. Any age is welcome. On any given day, you'll hear music coming from the stage, a little dancing, a little romancing, and really we have programs. We have children that come to play because on their school playgrounds they can't play together, so they come and they hang out at the Magical Bridge where they can do everything. And we have lots of great teens, kindness ambassadors all over. Miss Wheelchair California came last year and was swinging for the first time in 20 years since her accident. So what happens when you design a place for everyone? Well, everyone comes out. And so after we opened the Magical Bridge Playground in Palo Alto, we had a lot of requests from other communities that they wanted something similar. And so we started a foundation almost 4 years ago, and because we do live in this innovative, welcoming community of Silicon Valley, we received some funding to be able to create an additional 7 Magical Bridge playgrounds right now that are going up around the Bay Area, which we're very excited about. We have a lot of interest. We also recognize that at the school levels, our playgrounds there are also not really inviting for the many different types of children that we have, so we are also working on making recess more magical for school children. When we talked about evaluating, how did we do once we opened the playground in Palo Alto and we had this opportunity to build more, which of course I never in a million years would have expected, but it was it was an opportunity, of course, we had to take. There are many things that the playground industry is really not doing, unfortunately, because maybe they don't have to, but the need is really great. So we found that there were just very few things commercially available for those that have autism in our playgrounds. And so we saw the plastic thing that was available, and we thought, well, maybe we should do it out of wood and make it a little aesthetically more interesting and tactile. So we now are doing these hideaway huts for our friends with autism to get away from the active play. We designed, and we have a little patent on our slides that allows a wheelchair user to move over and wait in dignity for their wheelchair to come back. And I get very excited when I see intentional design around the country and around the world. And what was fun for me is to see these sensory rooms sprouting up around our country. And they are being created not because they have to be, but because these airports are being mindful of their users. They're recognizing that travelers can get anxious or overstimulated, so they're creating these. And so imagine if we had these in shops and in places where we go and those children don't have to run away with their parents into a car to get away from the sensory overstimulation. And if we had these little huts in places, how magical would that be? Evidently creating a playground for everybody is innovative still. So we've been getting a lot of awards, which we are very humbled by, very grateful for. A highlight for us is that last year we were actually invited to represent Silicon Valley as a social impact innovator for the playground that we created. And so as we end our time together, Ava was, of course, the spark that created the action to create a playground for the whole family, for the whole community. And there are so many other sparks in our world that are waiting for somebody to help them and respond. And we just must do that in anything that we do. So please be intentional in the places that you work, the places that you shop. If you see an opportunity to speak up for somebody that may not have a voice, consider doing that, because 1 billion people are out there and they really need our help. So I do invite you to intentionally design for everybody.